Good morning, everyone, and very much welcome to another Flash Friday. We're very happy again to be talking to you about the developments in fintech and taking you to everything that's happening on behind the scenes. And of course, I won't be doing it just by myself. I've got a very distinguished guest again today, and today that's Marca Wosoba, the General Manager for Modulr in the Netherlands. Good morning, Marca.
Good morning, Don. Thanks very much for having me today.
Yeah, it's great to see you here. And I'm really looking forward to dive in the industry together with you, understand what Modulr is doing, what your challenges are, what you're up to, and hopefully we'll be able to share some insights with our audience about what's going on in the industry and especially everything that's behind the scenes. So thank you everyone for joining. Let us know any comments if you have any questions, and we'll happily see if we can weave them into the story. But Marca, let's start with you. For people that are not so familiar with Modulr, tell us, what are you up to?
Oh, thanks for asking. So Modulr is an embedded payments business. So we provide embedded infrastructure for companies that have high volume of payments, want to reduce inefficiencies that they have within their business and payment processes. And we do that leveraging the payment permissions that we've acquired through the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, the Central Bank of Ireland, and shortly the Central Bank in the Netherlands. And we use those permissions to go out and get direct access to payment schemes like faster payments in the UK, where we settle directly with Bank of England, and where we've also become a principal member of MasterCard and Visa. And we bring all of that deep payment expertise as well as the technical integration. So we're an API first business, and we bring that to companies that want to reduce manual processes, reduce inefficiencies, and reduce the cost around delivering high volume payments.
Yeah, and I think you have a lot of, let's say, financial services companies as customers. But do you also see, for example, that non-financial services companies are actually beginning to get to see the benefit of using your services, for example? Is that range expanding, or do you see that it's still focused on financial services companies mostly?
That's a great question, Don. So our customer base is really very broad. So if you start from the premise that we really support customers that have a high volume of payments, you're right. We support financial services companies like Revolut, where we've built payment processes directly into their own offering for their clients that want to have sterling accounts in the UK, for example. But we've also embedded payment processes into other software companies and software systems. So that includes companies such as QuickBooks or Sage in the UK, where we have gone and taken an accounting software proposition and built payments directly into that for end users like SMEs, so that they never have to leave their accounting software site to undertake accounts, but also pay invoices to suppliers or manage payments and their accounts where they've been paid. So we're seeing that demand come from not just financial services, but a whole range of software as a service type of businesses, as well as other high volume businesses and industries such as payroll.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think generally, I let's say, once I'm actually looking at my finances, I want to be able to finish everything, right? Instead of going to another portal to actually try and make the payments or reconcile everything. So I would actually, and I think that's also what people are talking about now these days with embedded finance to a certain extent, right? Very often we talk about the financing side, but actually payments as being something that's just part of your experience somewhere without too much hassle is something that everyone's waiting for.
Absolutely. It's the desire from customers, whether you're someone working within a business or whether you're a consumer, but to never have to leave a site to complete the process. And that's really where companies like Modulr, that embedded infrastructure, particularly from a finance perspective, where that comes in. And you'll see a lot of businesses, whether they're a financial services company or perhaps an accounting company in another sector, they don't want to go out and develop that deep payment scheme expertise that Modulr has developed. It requires an enormous amount of financial expertise, regulatory obligations, but also technical requirements. And so leveraging the embedded finance experience of others is really going to be a key component for a whole host of industries, including software, in terms of really delivering for their end customers and delivering that customer experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really great, and I think that's what I also tend to really believe is like we're moving into this world where we just have digital Lego blocks that you could actually put together in any kind of experience that you would like to create, and that's really nice, I think, because you actually position yourself really as sort of a payments engine that you could plug into anything, right?
Absolutely. And we've done that because we're really a tech company. Modulr is young. So by nature, we launched in 2016. We are an API first business. So having the ability to really connect and integrate with a whole range of companies to deliver this financial services in a really seamless and efficient way means that, as you were describing, companies can go and create these Lego blocks and really connect up to financial services partners to deliver these propositions in a really seamless way. And that integration needs to be really smooth. And that's where API first businesses really have an advantage in that they're able to make that not just deliver the proposition. So it's not just the embedded payments experience that Modulr is bringing to customers, but doing it in a way that is not technically onerous for the companies that we're delivering it to. And that's a really important part of embedded finance, is ensuring that it's delivered in a way that isn't just great for the end customer and the end user, but that it doesn't cost companies so much to integrate from a resource perspective as well.
I fully agree. I think that's definitely the winning factor there. And do you see actually there, because I think you mentioned some customers more in the B2C side as well as on the B2B side, do you see much difference there in the way that they approach payments?
It's a good question. So the end user experience is obviously going to be different, and some of the requirements will be slightly different, or the way the use cases, for example, will be a bit different. But we don't really see a significant difference in terms of what customers are asking for, but more the way that is accessed, for example. So there might be, if we're talking about an accounting software provider, you will see more requirements around, say, account access and the need to ensure that the right people have the right authority for making payments, paying invoices, et cetera, to ensure that there's that control there. Whereas there isn't that exact requirement from a consumer perspective in terms of end user.
It's more directly tied into the account. Yeah,
exactly. But the expectations around this are still very similar, in that, we as consumers don't change our expectations or our mindset when we walk through the door of the office. We want a seamless payment experience. We want to have that integration. We want to have instant payments. We want to be able to see instantly funds moving in and out of accounts. And so I think the expectations around instant payments are the same, but some of the use cases will obviously vary.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting, because what I actually see is that very often that B2C innovation goes much faster, and you see that indeed then people walk into their office and figure out that, hey, wait a minute, why is this like it was 5 years ago in my private life? And that gives this push on the B2B innovation side, but it tends to be a bit behind towards B2C innovation. Of course, you have this employer, let's say, delay, where there's, let's say, the organization has to adapt, which is much harder to actually create something directed to consumers. But I can imagine there from that perspective, you get a bit of a different demand, but I could also see that in the end, everyone wants the same thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You're exactly right. When you go into your business life, you ask that exact question: why am I dealing with this sort of legacy technology and this legacy experience, which is completely outdated from a digital age point of view?
Yeah. And so I think what's interesting as well is that you did some research into customer behavior around payments, right? So I thought it's also really, really interesting and important also that it also shows, I think, that how you're engaged with the end users of your product, even though you're not selling it directly to them. But can you tell us a bit about what the research was about and some of the conclusions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy to dig into that, because there was some really interesting, at least from my perspective, working in payments, I still found some of the findings to be quite surprising. So we started with the idea that we wanted to help businesses to think through the importance of the payment experience in their own customer journeys, because Modulr is supporting businesses that are embedding payments. We're not providing payments to end customers typically. So what we wanted to do was, provide some research around that. So we surveyed over 2,000 end customers, and we did this using an independent think tank called Insights Avenue. And some of the findings were quite surprising in relation to the way that we were able to really cut the data across expectations, whether that was age, gender, etc. So we were really able to pull out some surprising findings. I mean, I'll share a few of those with you. But some of my favorites, I think, are in relation to the tipping point that we're now at in relation to the digital age. So we've been talking about the digital future for quite a long time. And I think that the overarching summary here is that we're now at the digital now. And some of the things that are driving that are that, we have spent the last 18 months primarily in our houses, whether we have liked that or not. And I think as a consequence of that, different age groups have really redefined or come to conclusions with regards to their what they're looking for from a payment experience. So, for example, older customers are likely to have extremely high expectations from a digital point of view. So 95% of older customers expect digital payments to be instant and convenient. And actually over 80% say that the payment experience can make or break their relationship with a business or brand. And that was one of the things that really surprised me, because I wasn't expecting over 2/3 of those customers who were surveyed that were 65 or older to be focused on convenience and speed of payment. I was expecting that more from a younger customer group, not an older one. So that's an example of one of the findings that we had that really made me think we've moved on, right? It's people from my parents' generation that are expecting instant payments, even more so than people who are younger than me.
Exactly. No, I think that's really interesting, and I think that's something that perhaps I think the industry has been talking about this already for quite a while. But it's really interesting to see actually that customers are asking for it so directly, and indicating that this is a necessity for them to actually be able to work with the brand. So I think that's a really interesting find. And do you think that's partly accelerated through COVID period? Indeed, that everyone had to go digital to a certain extent, and I think cash was much less attractive, of course, in the time where everything was potentially contaminated, and you should not get, hand each other any kind of infection. So I think that was a big driver. But do you think that really that accelerated all this?
Definitely. That was one of the, I think, the propellants. So we moved very quickly in the last 18 months. And that's not to say that we weren't on that trajectory, but when we were on the trajectory of moving towards digital, moving towards instant, and people's expectations about not just how payments would be delivered, but also how goods would be delivered. Suddenly you're waiting at home for something to come into your house because you couldn't get into a shop to receive it. And that period of the last 18 months really accelerated that. And it, I think, also pushed us in a different direction in terms of what we expect from merchants, what we expect from businesses in terms of payment experience, instantaneous payments, what we expect in terms of businesses, in terms of being in control of that payment process, and the impact it has on businesses when they're not as well. So we also had some findings about what happens when customers they get to the last stage of their purchase experience, the payment experience, and they find it particularly frustrating if that payment experience isn't great then. So we found that 44% of those customers are actually leaving the site, leaving the application, and going elsewhere to finish the purchase. And that's not necessarily new data. So there was, even 5 years ago, merchants were battling with shopping carts that were left behind and hadn't, where consumers hadn't completed the purchase. But what we also found through the research is that where 44% of those customers are abandoning the shopping experience, more than half of them are not actually telling anybody that they're doing so. So they are then abandoning, but no one ever finds out that they're leaving. And I don't know about you, Don. I occasionally, working in payments, and maybe this is because I'm a bit too into the whole payments experience, but I will occasionally contact a merchant and say, you could do this better. There are definitely better ways of doing this, and it's really impacting the customer experience. But I don't do that every time. Sometimes you just give up, right? Because you don't have the time to do it.
No, very recognizable. I also tend to indeed, as I know kind of the struggle that the parties behind it have to make, I also tend to really just, send a message, give feedback, and say like, okay, this is not the experience I want. Can you improve it?
Yeah.
Rather than so, and then I think that there's actually always a segment of customers that actually will do that, right? So I think that's also where being able to listen to your customers to figure out what's the standard that they're looking for with regard to your service level is really important to be able to keep up. Because you need to stay in touch with that, I think, because there will always be a couple of people that just like your brand and would like you to be part of the cool kids as well that are now coming up with new solutions, and they just want that service, but they'll happily take it from the brand that they're familiar with. Very interesting indeed. I like that as well, and I think that's I'm always let's say I think that the shopping experience, I think it's really really interesting to see how that's evolved. You see, of course, a lot of additional services also popping up there, playing an important role. Think about buy now, pay later, kind of, or payment mandates that are popping up. How do you look at that? Do you see that that's also something where Modulr would look into on how to combine the payments infrastructure with additional services?
So we are constantly thinking about how we innovate the proposition within Modulr for our existing customers, but also for industries that we want to segue into. So we've already developed that very deep payment infrastructure in the UK, but are constantly thinking about the additional services, particularly with regard to open banking, that we want to add to that. So Modulr, we consider ourselves to be at the forefront of the of innovation, and are always looking to add more services, whether that's confirmation of payee. So I think we were one of the first to offer that in the UK, request to pay, but also the kind of standards of open banking in terms of payment initiation and account information. So absolutely looking to add additional services all the time.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really interesting. I think that there's tons of things in the evolution. I think, let's say the actual payment will probably become less and less of a separate product, but it's more like an enabling rails on top of which the good stuff actually happens, right?
Definitely. And that's one of the things that actually came out of our research as well, is that customers are starting to associate the payment experience with the brand itself. And they're looking for brands to increase and improve the payment experience, and therefore improve their loyalty. But they're also increasingly concerned, and actually the age group of 18 to 25-year-olds over-indexed on this concern in relation to fraud. And we think it's because of COVID, because when asked if their concerns about fraud had increased or decreased over the last 18 months, they said that their fraud concerns had actually increased. So young people, and again, this is not older people who have been perhaps more familiar with, people stealing your post, and therefore, opening bank accounts or taking out a credit card on your behalf using your address and name. But this digital identity piece, and the need to have more security and fraud prevention measures around digital payments and the digital and instant economy, it's really important for younger generations as well. So there's a huge opportunity for embedded finance companies to deliver that to businesses, and for businesses to deliver that to their end customers. So not only does it provide greater security, does it prevent fraud, all things that we want to see as we move deeper and deeper into a digital economy, but it also enables businesses to develop deeper connections with their customers, and create more loyalty, and ultimately better experiences for the customer as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's a true case, and I think already if I look at the amount of phishing emails and all kinds of fake messaging, there's just been tons of that over the past year and a half, and especially what people missed was the offline option to validate the messaging, right? So to actually talk to a colleague and say like, hey, do you think that this is for real, or just be so that natural checks and balances, those natural checks and balances, I think we're kind of missing with causes of CEO fraud and phishing and other things to actually thrive from that perspective.
And what we can't forget is that fraudsters are becoming increasingly sophisticated. So they're getting better at doing this, at imitating our colleagues, and creating better, branding, more sophisticated emails that are more difficult for people to detect. So there's a real, increase in fraud that we all have to. Sorry?
So you would wish that sometimes we could go back to the old-fashioned Nigerian fraud, where they would say, we will send you 1 million if you send us 100,000 first.
Yes. Yeah, that was a bit more straightforward, right? And it's a lot less straightforward now. And we all just have to be much more aware in every facet of our life, whether it's, when we're making a purchase, to make sure we're doing it through the right site, we're being, using the right checks and balances when we're in our work life. And this comes through in payment experience as well. So one of the things that came out of our research was that customers don't like being redirected to a third-party payment provider. They don't like being redirected to another site. And you can see this in businesses as well. We talked about that need to be, fully seamless and connected, as a customer, but also, in our work life, not going into your accounting software to do one thing and then having to go to another site to do your payment. And that redirection is where customers are becoming a bit more nervous. They see that as an opportunity for fraud, for someone to intervene and you not to be connected to the site that you thought you were. So there's when we think about embedded finance, and when we at Modulr think about the opportunity that we have to bring security to customers and to businesses, that embedded finance is another opportunity to increase security and reduce the opportunity for fraudsters.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really fair point, and but of course, really interesting also to remark here that the Dutch are slightly different in this sense, since of course one of the major payment methods here is Ideal, which actually is based on a redirection model. So that's kind of interesting, right? How actually this brand was able to pull this through. And especially, I think, build market share in a time when the redirection part was less sensitive. Because I think that actually ties into the fraudster experience that people have, that, I'm getting a link A, but I'm being sent to link B, is where I'm getting to feel like, this is kind of shaky. But unless you actually go to a familiar brand, right? That you trust and actually that you recognize the experience.
Yeah. And in this case, they're being redirected to their own bank, so their own banking app, for example. But you're right, it is a redirection. And what's really interesting for me as a non-Dutch person coming into the Netherlands and having lived here for the last 3 years is how ubiquitous Ideal is. It is such a, it's incredible how necessary it is for financial services firms to have Ideal as a payment method if they want to be successful in the Netherlands. But what's also interesting is how innovative Ideal is. If you think about the time that it was developed, it really led open banking when open banking wasn't a thing, right? So it really predates it. And I think for me, that's one of the things that makes the Dutch economy quite interesting, is that there is an enormous amount of innovation that does happen here, and that has happened here from a financial services perspective that really predates what anyone else did. But now what we see is there are other open banking initiatives, that can push some of the payment methods into a slightly new space, into a newer place.
No, exactly. I fully agree with you. It was very innovative when it was built, but it was quite some time ago. So it's but I think they're actually also working on an overhaul for the Ideal system at the moment, and I do recognize as well that it's what they call the law of the limitation by advantage, right? So the fact if you're too far ahead, you will at some point have to slow down, or you will be slowing down automatically, and so others will take over at some point. That's I think always the case, and that's something that's definitely really tricky. You need to keep an eye on to keep up with technology stacks, and especially there on the side of what the customers expect, right? So I think that non-redirection experience, I think, would make a lot of sense in the end. That it would also, from the people from Ideal, would also think about something like that, for example.
Yeah, and I think they are reconsidering some of the models around that.
Exactly. And so, but maybe then if we talk about sort of this payments experience, right? So where are things heading? I mean, is there anything exciting that you would see like in 5 or 10 years from now that you say like, hey, this is what I would really hope payments would look like, or maybe not look like at all?
Yeah, that's I think a really great question. There are so many things that are coming out of Europe at the moment with regard to whether it's payment initiatives, whether it's some of the regulation that's coming down the track as well. Everything from things around consumer credit to PSD3, and then the obligations that financial services companies are going to have around AML with the sixth anti-money laundering directive. So there's a lot that, from a financial services point of view, that we have to be thinking about in terms of ensuring that we've got the right security and the right measures in place to deliver for our end customers and deliver it in a way that's protects the economy as well. But there are great things that I think we can think through from a more innovative perspective in terms of really where we go next with embedded finance. And I think we've done a lot within the embedded payment space. So, connecting directly to payment schemes, settling directly with the Bank of England, and then embedding this functionality into, software companies and their processes, and building it into other financial services, tech stacks, so that they don't have to go out and do that. But where I think we can take it next from a financial services sector perspective is to go beyond that and think about how can that help customers who might have a pension to see, or might be managing other investments, to be able for them to be able to see all of that in one place without necessarily having to leave one site. And that's where I think we can take it a step further, so that it becomes more about the broader financial services proposition that's delivered to customers, that's delivered to businesses, and really emphasizing the embedded finance piece as opposed to just embedded payments. Yep. And that's where as a customer, that's where my wish list really lies.
I can imagine, especially, and that's the nice part about being in the industry. It's much easier to look further ahead based on what you know and where things could be heading. But I fully agree with you. I think fully embedded experience where things get really seamless, and where actually indeed the technology stack is actually, whether it's financial or non-financial services, actually integrates all together. Right? Yeah. So I think for me, there's no difference between any kind of software as a service or API business. It should just all be connected at the same level. Whether I'm talking to my utility here, or my bank, or my telephone provider, or any subscription that I have, for me, it's all the same as a user.
And I think this is where in the West we're slightly behind where some companies in the East were, right? So if you think about some of the big tech companies in China, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Customers, they live all of their life within one application, whether it's banking, it's payments, paying utilities, going and getting their grocery shopping, to some of the more discretionary consumer goods, communicating with friends, getting a taxi and paying for it. It all happens in one place. And for us in the West, we are not so familiar with that as a sort of concept, but it is out there, and it's a direction that, from a convenience perspective, is massive. But then
I would also expect that to happen. Yeah. I think we're still concerned about privacy very much, but I do believe that we're heading in that direction anyway.
Agree. There is definitely a data protection component, and if we're living our life within that application, we have to trust that the data we're sharing with the application is used in a way that is, not just to the company's benefit, right? And that it's, not being shared in a way that's going to be harmful for the end customer. But that's definitely a concept that is alive and well within the world, but that, we just haven't really experienced within Western Europe.
Yeah. I think that's actually really interesting also to hear from you, because I think you've also worked in Asia to a large extent, right? Because I think you're especially thriving in, let's say, taking companies to places where they've never been before.
Yes.
Like actually bringing Modulr to the Netherlands. And maybe, as we don't have that much time left, but I'm really curious about sort of your first, how did you land here? How does it feel for you to actually build Modulr now here based in Amsterdam?
Great. To say in short, it feels really great. The Netherlands has such a terrific ecosystem and environment for tech and fintech companies. So, great access to talent with just excellent universities in Amsterdam and this kind of surrounding Randstad. A great, vibrant fintech ecosystem with, Holland FinTech, for example, but also a really well-respected, very transparent and engaged regulator. And then on top of that, you just have a really great place to for people to live and to work within Amsterdam. I think Amsterdam as a city has done a really good job of ensuring that it can welcome a whole host of people, and that they're able to live in a way that is that's enjoyable, whether you're a young person wanting to enjoy an exciting city, or someone with a family that needs access to great schools. So in terms of landing here from both a professional point of view, but also from a personal point of view, it's been a really great move. And I think for Modulr, we've been going out and trying to hire just the best people that we can, that are really innovative, smart, and want to bring this embedded payment experience to a whole host of businesses. And we've really been pleased with the talent that we found across product, operations, risk and compliance, and then moving forward with business development as well as finance. So it's been a really great move. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, great. Well, I think it's really wonderful that you joined here with your team, and we're very much looking forward to be working with you, and of course support Modulr in its further journey to make embedded finance available to everyone. So
great.
Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
And thank you, Don. It was really great to be here. Thanks for asking us.
That was wonderful. So looking forward to catch you again in person, hopefully soon. All measures permit. And for everyone who listened in today, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this talk behind the scene on what's going on at Modulr and in the payment space. We had a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to see you again very soon. Thanks a lot, and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, everybody.